I would have more interested to see you put a background of Roy Innis getting into a fist fight on live TV with Al Sharpton when he was still fat and wearing Dookie gold chains.
So apparently, Al Sharpton instigated that on Morton Downey. This is all from Morton Downey's production crew. You know, Morton Downey's long gone. And I don't even know if our guest remembers Morton Downey. I don't know if she's old enough to remember Morton Downey. Morton Downey, for those that don't remember, was outrage news, cable news, late night show based out of New York. So when cable was really starting to pop off, where you would get like local channels from other states, like I would get TBS, and then there was a WGN in Chicago. There was a New York station that I got, and it would play Morton Downey Jr. show at night, because me and Teray would talk about this, because I think he went to a Morton Downey show.
Did he admit that to you publicly?
Yeah, we had a whole fucking conversation, the long ass conversation about Morton Downey Jr. And apparently, I think what's his name wanted some money to appear on the show, and he was like, "I'll get you the ratings," and he like instigated the whole fucking Roy Innis slap
to cash a check.
Like out, yeah, this shitty guy, man. So again, this is Morton Downey's production people telling the story years later. Al Sharpton was not on the documentary, but there's an interesting documentary. I forget what it's called, maybe Provocateur or some shit like that. But before we bring in our guest, I made a clip, and for those of you that don't know, sometimes I ask Pascal for some ideas. And I told Pascal I'm going to make this clip. And I said, I want to make this just one of the best clips ever, because we had a bit of an idea before this. I'm not going to get into that. But he goes, you know what you got to do? You got to watch that Tony Brown's Journal. I was like, there's no clips of that. This shit's like fucking 2 hours long. Well, you know what you got to do? You got to watch the Gary, Indiana convention. I was like, nigga, that's like fucking an hour and a half long as well. So I had to watch so much Black nationalism shit. It's making me very angry. So please enjoy this clip.
Now, some of the white news media has criticized us for calling this convention and welcoming all of our brothers and sisters. But we shall determine who comes to this convention, not the white news media. Decision. We demand that any party which asks our support acknowledge the inhumanity every black man, woman, and child faces in 100 different ways each and every day of his existence.
In the history of American politics, there has never been a movement rooted in improving the lives of working class and poor Americans that did not include black people. What are the consequences of contemporary black electoral politics being rooted in the corporate right wing of the Democratic Party with a large number of white progressives to its left? How can working class black politics be brought to life in order to challenge this reality? We will ask former Bernie Sanders communication director Briahna Joy Gray that question and more. This is Revolution.
It could very well be too late for the black man in America. Probably the next 5 or 10 years will indicate whether or not the black man can survive. Our struggle for survival is a very real struggle. And the white man has prepared genocide for black people. Unemployment, the black man is no longer necessary. Unemployment is going to be a way of life for black people. We are going to face increasing dangers and problems as the days pass. And we're totally unequipped as black people to deal with them. We're a part of a slave culture. We have no preparation. We have no black institutions capable of dealing with white racist institutions designed to serve only white people. We must deal with the problem that confronts black people by building black institutions, by understanding that only a separatist position is a viable position for black people. Any organization or any leader in America who today advocates integration is a foe and an enemy of black people and their survival in the coming years.
The Congressional Black Caucus, composed of the 13 black members of the U.S. House of Representatives, believe that we are on the threshold of a new era of political power for blacks, not only in America, but in Africa and in the Caribbean area.
We feel the survival of black America is threatened by racial schizophrenia that plagues a great portion of black leadership. Malcolm called this problem the problem of the house nigger against the field nigger. Its destructive ramification exists yet today. Black masses are governed and led by an elite few who have split loyalties between their black and white families. These racial schizoids are leading us down the path of racial genocide through the propagation of forced integration and the calculated assimilation. Black people could very well disappear as a people and certainly lose all prospect for black political, economic, and social power and unity.
It's getting close to election time, so I thought I'd drop in on my favorite project people, the Evans family. And, of course, my warmest and heartfelt greetings and salutations to you two, Winifreda.
Pascal, I hope you appreciate the Good Times clip at the end.
That was a nice touch. That was a nice touch.
So without any further ado, our guest is the host of a very successful podcast, the Bad Faith Podcast. She is a journalist. She's a lawyer. She was it comms director for the Sanders campaign? No, what was she?
Something to that. Press director of press. Something
Press secretary. She's press secretary. I can see her in the virtual green room giggling at me fucking up her title. She is the Briahna Joy Gray.
I was the national press secretary, which I don't fault you for not remembering because I often forget my own title. In fact, I introduced myself to someone in Cleveland last week and had to ask my former colleague on the campaign to remind me what I was called because I kept tripping over my words. Also, people try to blame me for things that were not actually in my control because I was not comms director. So I like to make that clarification.
Okay, so I just want you to know, Pascal wrote that script. He effed that one up. Because usually I don't like to say the name of the person on the show because, you know, I just don't like to say the name of the person on the show. But Pascal's like, no, we got to say her name. I was like, really? Her name? This one? But I do want to say this, and this, I'm not, we did a video. So we do a video series for Zero Books. It's a video essay series. I don't know if you know the filmmaker Adam Curtis, British guy, makes documentaries. Okay. As you can see with that clip, I'm a fan of his work, right? And Pascal had wrote this essay where it's called The Great Awakening, right? And in it, as I'm putting the images and the stuff together for the video, my first thing to do, because we were calling out the black chattering class that was pushing back on the Bernie Sanders campaign, saying that it wasn't black enough, there was no quote unquote black agenda. And the first thing that had popped into my mind was your appearance on the Karen Hunter show, which I watched yelling at the screen.
Hopefully not at me.
No, well, no, I don't. They were rough. It was
probably the most difficult appearance of my professional life in the context of the Bernie campaign, although in some ways my most fulfilling. I
didn't put that up. I was like, I'm going to clip this. Karen Hunter said enough horrible shit during that campaign, the 2020 and 2016 campaign runs, that I was able to clip something that I thought was a little bit better, right? But when you went on there, like, I felt like maybe you knew it was slightly hostile territory.
It was very hostile. You know why?
Like beforehand, you know where you're going, right?
do you know what prompted that appearance?
You got to tell me what.
I was invited on because MSNBC correspondent and former editor at The Root, Jason Johnson, had just made his remarks about
you are a wayward black girl,
being a misfit black girl, right?
Misfit black girl, yeah.
And he had done so on the Karen Hunter show, and there was some pushback from the black women hosts / guests at the time, but mostly just kind of snickering. And I think that she felt like it was her obligation to have me on to give me equal time. So it was a kind of a begrudging, I felt, invitation, although one I was grateful for, because I wanted an opportunity to, yes, push back. And she didn't have to do that, and I appreciate that she did. But I did know what her politics were going into it, because ultimately it was her podcast that was kind of fertile ground for the kind of attitude that Jason Johnson displayed, and which ultimately got him let go from The Root.
The clip that I use actually from her show is her saying, and for those of you that want to see it, there's a link in the description wherever you're listening to this or watching this show, the Dispatch series on Zero Books. The clip I use is her saying that she doesn't trust Bernie Sanders because he comes from a place with no culture, which is New York. But I guess it was because he was a mayor in Vermont, or a congressperson.
Senator from Vermont.
Senator from Vermont. Yeah, sorry. He was mayor first.
Yeah, first.
And I've been to Burlington. I actually played great shows there. They actually asked me back to fucking Burlington.
And you're at a lovely place I've never been.
It is very white. Let's be real.
It's the whitest state, Vermont.
Is it? Has Vermont been in North Dakota?
I'm pretty sure it's the whitest state. There was a whole discourse a couple of years ago about how Bernie Sanders was bad because Vermont had a disproportionate number of black people incarcerated. But if you look at the raw numbers, it's like 200 black people in the whole state that are in jail, which is over the national average. But to bring it in line with the national average, it would take like 20 people being let go or something like that. So that's how few black people are actually in the state of Vermont. Certainly over incarceration in any instance is a problem, but it was definitely one of those small sample size kind of situations.
Now, the discourse that was going on during that campaign, which was very frustrating because it felt like it was a hell of a way to neutralize this new burgeoning fascination with socialism. So Pascal and I have had this conversation several times. Bernie Sanders, in my opinion, was kind of the perfect candidate after the blow up of Occupy Wall Street, right? There's now we're recognizing that there's this elite, powerful class, and you have this guy running on social democracy. But the pushback kind of out of nowhere, because I don't remember this pushback. I know Pascal and I are older than you, but I'm sure you voted in the Obama election, or you were of voting age.
Yes, I am very much grown at this point. I'm about to enter my late 30s, arguably, this weekend. So I assure you that I was old enough to vote for Obama.
Do you remember the same level of pushback for what was the Obama Black agenda?
I don't, actually. I remember nothing but enthusiasm and fanfare from liberals. I remember a very brief period of time where there was some conversation about Hillary Clinton and whether or not, there was some kind of iconoclastic personalities who wanted to not be the black person who kind of knee-jerk voted for Barack Obama in my circle, and who were like playing footsie with the idea of entertaining Hillary Clinton. But the way she behaved in the course of that primary disavowed people of that notion, I think, disabused people of that pretty quickly. And I don't remember much liberal, pushback from the broad left.
I don't.
Well, the thing that's interesting is that there was no demand of a black agenda from Barack Obama, because Barack Obama was the black agenda.
Yeah.
Right? That's the way he was presented. That, all of your political aspirations are tied up in the fact that this, Robert Rubin, Wall Street manufactured candidate is going to be your president, and make sure 50% of your wealth evaporates before he's gone, and do nothing about it. So, I think everyone knows what my position is on Obama by about now. So I think I'm pretty transparent about that.
And I don't even remember you getting a chance to even bring that up in that discussion with Karen Hunter. Because and again, if you guys want to see it, it's definitely on the internet. But it's like Bree against, was it 3 or 4 people in the studio?
I believe there were 3. I mostly remember Karen Hunter and the gentleman who is a kind of her Robin, as it were.
Quivers or Batman's Robin?
No, I mean, I guess Batman.
Combination of both.
But I meant Howard Stern, his
Robin Quiver. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I like the Batman Robin with Robin Quivers in Robin's costume.
Robin Quivers, yes.
Yeah, that guy was the worst. And Karen Hunter is the worst. You handled yourself a lot better than I would, because it would have got real hood in there fast.
Well, I will say I did have some allies. I went to the bathroom afterward, and a couple of the young producers or interns, young women in their like early to mid 20s were in there, and they're like, well, we're so sorry. We all like Bernie, and we really appreciated you coming on. And so I know when you're in a situation like that and it feels really onerous and you're in the thick of things, that it's not representative of the world as a whole. And there are people listening who are willing to consider your view a lot more than the person that you're engaging with. And that's what keeps me level-headed when otherwise I might feel inclined to pop off, as it were.
One thing, and I'm going to pivot to Pascal. One thing you actually bring up, Pascal, a lot, and what I saw in that interview, and the reason why I bring that up, we're talking about a crisis in Black politics, and here you have one of the largest figures in Black political media in Karen Hunter, right? Literally attacking you from the right. And one thing Pascal talks about, and we were talking about it in that video essay, The Great Awakening, is that you have, for the first time in history, white progressives that are far to the left of Black liberals. Mm-hmm. Pascal, did you want to?
Yeah, well, that's pretty much the theme of our show. That's not the theme of our show. It's going to be the theme of my book. But one of the things that motivated Jason and I coming together to do this podcast, besides the fact that we both are friends of Torrey Reed, who decided, because he knew I was thinking about starting my own podcast, and he kind of put us together, is that one of the things that frustrated both of us pretty extensively was the fact that we saw the not just the chattering class, but particularly the Black neoliberal chattering class intentionally try to paint socialism as a white thing. Yeah. Now, for me, as someone who had been writing at Black Agenda Report since 2010, I was enraged with that depiction. And and by the way, not only was I enraged with the Black neoliberals who were making that, and I'll be very candid and transparent, I was enraged at my fellow Black leftists at the time for not taking up the mantle to clarify the history of what many of them cling to as the Black radical tradition in the wake of that assault by Black neoliberals, simply because they did not want to seem like they were siding with Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. And I publicly, in a Facebook post, called out many of my comrades on the Black left and said, listen, I'm not asking you to cape for Bernie Sanders, and I'm not saying that I love Bernie, because I didn't vote for Sanders. I didn't support him because of his foreign policy, when I felt he was kind of weak on foreign policy in 2016, even though everyone knows I despised the Clintons. Mm. I wasn't a Democrat anyway, so I couldn't have voted in the primary. Mm. But the point that I made was that it's kind of ridiculous for us who are Black leftists, socialists, and Marxists to make Bernie Sanders public enemy number one when he's running in a primary against Hillary Clinton.
Right.
And
yeah, I mean, my entire career in journalism was sparked by my similar frustrations. I just was an attorney minding my own business in 2016, but I supported Bernie Sanders. I was introduced to him by my mother, who has always been historically a third-party voter. Obama was the first vote for a Democrat in her lifetime.
Green Party? Is your mom part of the Green Party?
I don't know if she would identify as such, but she has historically voted Green.
Gotcha.
I mean, she registers as a Democrat because typically you have to vote. I mean, certainly in New York, you have to be a registered Democrat to vote in the primary. You know, New York has some of the most retrograde voting laws in the entire country. So much for northeastern blue state liberalism. So I was so frustrated by the overwhelming media narrative that was so intense in 2016. I mean, we all just went through 2020, but just really remember how intense it was in 2016, where it was like the "you ain't black" narrative that Biden said out loud this round was, you know, a thread running through every word printed about the primary. You know, if you liked Bernie Sanders, you couldn't be black. There were 0 black Bernie supporters, went the narrative, completely erased anybody but 20-year-old bearded men living in their mother's basement from the public idea of what could be a Bernie supporter. And so I started a podcast actually in the month leading up to the election with one of my best friends who is also not white. He's Korean American and gay. And we were like, okay, we both like Bernie. Let's just talk about it and at least, you know, put a face on this idea. And then I started writing the next year, in part to draw attention to that podcast. And my articles were all about, you know, Bernie Sanders and identity politics and how identity.
For the Intercept at that time?
No, at this time it was Current Affairs.
Current Affairs? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Another black writer at Current Affairs who I went to law school with but didn't really know. We ended up on the same side of a lot of Facebook arguments with our mutual classmates who were kind of using this kind of racialized rhetoric to justify their support of Hillary Clinton. And we became friends because we were like the 2 black girls fighting this fight every day. And she wrote for Current Affairs and ended up putting me on with the magazine. And then those articles did very well, and I got more opportunities to write. And then in the beginning of 2018, Ryan Grimm at The Intercept reached out and asked if I wanted to come on as a senior politics editor. So really my whole journey away from the law and toward journalism, which is what I always wanted to do, was really sparked by my kind of unbridled frustration. I could not keep in how, you know, angry making the narratives were back in 2016 about the impossibility of anyone who was non-white supporting progressive politics.
Truly progressive politics, which is a big reason why I started this show, was to try to bring back this, our connection to progressive socialist Marxist politics. This has been part of the black tradition
since the 19th century, man. The Colored Farmers Alliance.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a bit of a personal question. How did you feel getting this attack from other black people questioning your perceived blackness because you literally were for policies that historically Negroids have been for some time? Like, seriously, I want to know, how does that make you feel when you are the black girl going out capping for this, as they said it, 70-some-year-old white man? How many times did you hear that? Right?
Yeah, what was so funny is that I might be forgetting someone, but it seemed to me that everybody in the presidential race in 2016 was white.
Yeah. Well, Kamala Harris, right?
In fact, I, as a Green Party voter in 2016, actually had a black person and a woman on my ticket. That's who I voted for in 2016.
So did I.
In the general election.
Friend of show, Ajamu.
Right. And, we also interviewed him on Bad Faith Pod recently. So, it was insane. I mean, just really, I don't want to like traumatize people by taking you back on this historical journey to 2016. But Hillary Clinton somehow was our abuela. There was an article that was like, Hillary Clinton is the real black woman. There were the way the arguments were being framed about Bernie Sanders and his whiteness, you truly would have thought that Hillary Clinton was born in a small village in Nigeria. Like, she was just going to be the blackest person who ever stepped foot on the planet. There was the whole narrative about how, there's some like apocryphal story about it takes a village, basically one of these narratives that Hillary talks about learning from an African woman. Like there was all of this hot sauce in your bag. I don't care if she really does carry hot sauce in her bag. It was all part of a narrative that was supposed to make Hillary Clinton seem like the Black candidate, like the candidate of color. It was like this collective national delusion. And I had all of these white coworkers haranguing me on a daily basis, talking about how somehow I didn't get what Black people really wanted. One colleague of mine, one classmate of mine argued that it was disenfranchising Black people. I don't want to dig up old things because we've gotten past this and I consider her friend again, but she argued that it was, quote, disenfranchising Black people to vote for Bernie Sanders after the southern states had voted and Hillary Clinton had overwhelmingly won them. At that point, Black people had spoken. Therefore, for me to vote contrary to them was literal, quote, disenfranchisement.
When Teray was on the show, we talked about when Bill Clinton ran for president, and Teray reminded me that it was Toni Morrison that calls him our first Black president. Toni Morrison.
Yeah. Although didn't she say that, wasn't there some context and she regrets how that had spread?
She ended up paying Ishmael Reed a bunch of money to write a play shitting on Hamilton. So that for me is
her redemption arc.
The contextual reality in terms of policy, right? That you had the Black shattering class who prior to 2016 had been caping for the Clintons since 1992. Let's not forget that it is through the machinations of the Black political class, Vernon Jordan, and as well as, what is the name of the brother who was the lawyer who worked on had Bill Clinton's campaign, the Black guy, that bullet in the head on a plane, died. Oh, come on. What is his name?
Black guy?
Yes.
Help us out, chat.
Oh my God. Yes, he was Bill Clinton's
Vernon Jordan? No.
Not Vernon Jordan.
He just died recently.
1992. It was not Phil Foster. Oh my God. I gotta find it.
Ron Brown?
Brown. Thank you. Yes.
All right. I just Googled it. I don't actually know.
Yes. Ron Brown worked on Bill Clinton's campaign, and it was basically through the Black political class putting pressure on the Democratic Party to help create Bill Clinton. What is fascinating about that is that Bill Clinton is one of these Southern governors who literally starts the Democratic Leadership Conference, the DLC, in 1988, which was created in reaction to Jesse Jackson's ability to register over 2 million Black voters. And it was created literally because they felt that the Democratic Party focusing on Black issues was going to cost the party perpetually, because in the age of Reaganism, the white working class would be turned away from the Democratic Party because they felt that they were focusing too much on, the Black problems. And that the policy decisions of the new Democrats, the third way Democrats, which come about with the rise of the DLC. By the way, guess what favorite civil rights hero and congressman was a signatory of that DLC? You know who it is? Can I tell you, Briahna?
Tell me.
John Lewis. John Lewis was a signatory on this institutional move by the Democratic Party to gut and throw Black issues under the bus in order to appeal to corporate funds and corporate money and use Black people as a scapegoat. So what happens with the rise of Clinton is that the Democratic Party early on doubles down on the Clinton-Nixon underclass ideology that Black people are broken, no policy can be used to fix them. You get the welfare mothers narrative with the cut to welfare with the cut of AFDC. You have the mass incarceration policies that augment the already existing mass incarceration agenda that comes from Nixon and continues under Reagan. You have, of course, the deregulation of financial services that eviscerates Black wealth in the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis. Don't get me too particularistic about Bill Clinton's policies towards Haiti as well, or Rwanda, or anyone else in the African country. But Bill Clinton and the Clintons, and I've said this before publicly, I've said this in the Real News Network, there has not been a president that has done more damage to Black people in America than Bill Clinton, perhaps going back to Woodrow Wilson. And the sheer fact that these fat back and biscuit eating Negroes of the Black chattering class and the Black political class caped for this vampire, not once, but twice, second time with his wife, indicates the sheer bankruptcy of this phenomenon we know as Black politics.
Yeah.
I'll stop there, and I'd like to hear your reaction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I remember that the only moment of pushback from anyone who was perceived to be, I think, credible or had a significant platform was that Michelle Alexander article. And it came too late. I mean, it was appreciated. You know, I don't know if you remember, I think it was in The Nation.
I do remember.
About why it was called something like why Hillary Clinton doesn't deserve the Black vote. And it made the case. And she was right, but it came too late in the game. And there was nobody else who came out of the woodwork to support her in that view. In fact, I remember at the time, obviously we all know that Ta-Nehisi Coates, especially in that moment, was like the voice of Black America as far as white liberals were concerned.
Briahna, wait a minute. Can you say that again? Briahna? Ta-Nehisi Coates was what now? Say it again.
As far as white liberals were concerned, the voice of Black America.
He was
Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote an article before he got radicalized, talking about how he agreed with Bill Cosby's pound cake speech. Didn't know that.
Right. I don't even remember that. What I remember, though, very clearly from 2016 was obviously the Case of Reparations article, which was very long and had a lot.
And it moved you, didn't it? It moved you, didn't it?
It was substantive in plenty of other respects, but he couldn't resist dropping this Bernie hit job at the end, where he says that Bernie is somehow unique in his lack of support for reparations, even though his stance was identical to Hillary Clinton's and even a smidge better than Obama's. And that became a whole narrative cycle where suddenly it had the benefit of putting reparations back into the national discourse, but it seemed very cynically only for the purpose of sidelining and marginalizing Bernie Sanders. Because of course, even though Hillary Clinton could be criticized and should have been criticized on the exact same basis, it was never about a substantive, broader left support of reparations for these people. It was a cynical deployment to marginalize the left candidate.
It was a demobilization tactic to basically find a way to put a dagger in the idea of Black people supporting a socialist or democratic socialist or a socialist light agenda that has been the norm for Black politics since Martin Luther King, since A. Philip Randolph, Bayard Rustin, Malcolm X. Show me a capitalist and I'll show you a bloodsucker. The Black Panther Party, going back to the Black socialists and communists of the 1930s and 40s. Ella Baker. But again, because some of these folks know Black political history, some of them don't. Some of them don't care to learn, because their paychecks are tied to propping up these neoliberal vampires, these corporate-friendly Wall Street pawns that have been grounding Black people to powder for decades.
Right. Well,
they realized that the most dangerous thing to the ruling class in this country was to have Black people shift their politics from the neoliberal flank of the Democratic Party to a left politics that was rooted in material policy that would benefit.
That's not race. Let's be honest. That's not race first politics. So I felt like a lot of the conversations that I would see you in when you were with these very antagonistic figures of the Black chattering class were race first politics. And the great Cedric Johnson, who I hope you have on your show very soon.
You got it.
I've been reading his book to kind of get ready for today, Revolutionaries to Race Leaders. When you look at where race first politics have gotten us, and also go back and watch the show with Preston Smith. Where did any of that great society shit get us? There's Ebony magazines. I was mad at Pascal because I was like, Pascal, can you please just pass this on to Bree to get her ready for the show today? And he's like, she's gonna be fine. I was like, I know she's smart, went to Harvard. I got it. I read the bio, but can you just pass some shit on to a monkey ass so she get ready for the show? He's like, I'm not passing on anything to her.
I love to do reading. I love reading.
So I found Ebony magazine has archived all their shit on Google. And in the 70s, Ebony was like pretty fucking dope. And they had a great issue in our birth month, August 73, called The Black Middle Class, because there is a new burgeoning black middle class in the 70s, right? Coming out of that great society. But at the same time, as we have this burgeoning black middle class, there's some class issues in who got to come up with these great society programs and who stays on the bottom. And also what that did for certain movements. I think we've mentioned it before on the show. I know there's a lot of people watching from your channel as well. There's a great movie from the 80s called I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, which actually jokes about that. Where
yeah. So I haven't quite seen it, but my mother made a valiant attempt to show it to us. Soon after she got remarried, it was me, my 16-year-old stepbrother, I was about 20, and my brother who's 22. And we were all at my stepfather's house for the first time. And she said, let's watch this classic black film. And she forgot that it opens with a sex scene with an underage, and I believe a sex worker. So that lasted about 5 minutes.
Well,
but I'll give it a new watch now that I'm
give it a new watch. There's a scene with the now late Link Hayes of Mod Squad fame. I can't remember the gentleman's real name. He played Prince's dad in Purple Rain, but he recently passed away. There's a scene where Keenan Wayans' character is trying to rally.
Oh, no. Actually, that was Sweet Back. I'm sorry. She tried to make
it very fast. It's like Mario Van Peebles. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. My bad. I should have interrupted. Go ahead.
But close enough. Oh, she disappeared.
Did she?
Yeah.
What happened?
Deep State, dude.
Did the deep state take out Briahna? Are you serious?
I'm not joking. Clarence Williams III. Yeah, the deep state just snatched her up.
Yo.
She totally disappeared.
Let me see if we can get her through.
That's insane. But anyway.
I wonder if she lost internet.
She probably lost the internet. She'll be back. Deep State totally snatched her up. Somebody said Cuba's mad he's not doing Foreign Policy Thursday.
Is she back?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Can you?
Hey.
Uh-oh.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what just happened.
See what you guys did to her?
Did you lose internet in your apartment?
Maybe I just got kicked off for a second, but you can hear me, right?
We can hear you just fine.
I can't see you.
Okay.
Oh, there she goes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Weird.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, Deep State.
We have, we get little internet blurs, so usually we're like, oh, Deep State got him. Deep State got him.
She takes off the Scooby-Doo mask and it's Karen Hunter. Surprise, niggas.
You guys are trying to get me into trouble. No, I'm good. I think my browser just closed. I think I had too many windows open or something. I'm sorry. This is a user error.
No problem. What were we talking? Y'all
Mario
were talking
Van
about. Yeah, Mario Van
Peebles was a child screwing somebody, but that was Tweetback starts. But there's a scene in I'm going to get you sucked, basically where the radical revolutionary character, Keenan Ivory Wayans' character, is trying to rally the troops, if you will, to stop the scourge of. It's a play on drugs, but it's like gold chains or some shit like that. And the revolutionary character is like, well, they're all gone. They got government jobs.
I mean, he's not doing it. Jason's underway because Keenan Ivory goes, what happened to the brothers? What happened to the brothers of the movement? What happened to the revolutionaries, the radicals? And the brother said, they got jobs.
and you know, we were having a conversation earlier today, Pascal and I, and that was actually part of the conversation where also in doing that clip, there's a lot of figures that not everybody's going to know. And from that conversation, I actually took people that I had a feeling that most people wouldn't know unless you really were a student of Black politics or politics of that era, right? I could have took Kwame Ture and Amiri Baraka, and Elijah Muhammad said some really horrible right-wing shit in there as well. But even when you listen to these guys talk, it sounds like Tucker Carlson. And there were even comments on the clip like, damn, some of these guys sound like Tucker Carlson. It's like, but that's a nationalist program, as Pascal was saying earlier.
Yeah, well, there's a certain kind of component to aspects of Black, because there are different types of Black nationalism. You have revolutionary nationalism, which is the Black nationalism of the Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, which is based on socialism, dialectical materialism, challenging class, but it still is rooted in the concept that Black people are an internal colony. Then you have petite bourgeois Black nationalism, which is like, we shall uplift the race by the fact that we have all these degrees and professional status. And we, you know, that's kind of like the NAACP, Urban League, Talented 10th Black nationalism. And then you have the classical kind of segregationist kind of Marcus Garvey, Nation of Islam, Klieg type. Reverend Klieg, the pastor that was in that video, the intro video, is the pastor from a very known Black nationalist church in Detroit called the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And if anyone knows anything about Detroit, the Shrine of the Black Madonna is a sacred holy ground of like Black nationalist meanings. And this politics is very, very popular in a lot of places. As someone who was a Black nationalist in one time, as I was, Harlem in New York has a lot of Black nationalists. It had anyway a Black nationalist overtone because of Harlem. Chicago is still a big time Black nationalist kind of city, and Detroit also. It's not surprising that these are also three places where the Nation of Islam was very big as well. So as someone who came out of Black nationalist thinking, as I did early in my years, I realized after doing literature and reading on the history of this kind of ideological philosophy, which is an organically, African-American tradition. There's a great book called The Golden Age of Black Nationalism by a man named Wilson Jeremiah Moses. It's actually a conservative project. It's not a left project at all. It's really about the fact that there's a need for Black vindication or to prove themselves to the world that they are worthy of treatment. And much of it is based on, respectability politics and kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps. So when people ask, like, where do these tendencies come from? They actually come from the ideological foundations of Black nationalist discourse. And if you read The Golden Age of Black Nationalism, I have a couple of books on the origins of Black nationalism here that I'm actually revisiting. And basically, it's really about proving to white people that Negroes are deserving of equal treatment. And one of the problems I've always had with that vindicationist, I wrote a piece that I told you about the politics of redemption, that Black people need to be redeemed with that posture, is that, number one, it never happens. All right. And number two, that this, what makes Black people in this position is about policy. It's about capitalism. It's about how political economy affects them. Not that Black people are psychologically broken. One of the things about me, if you'll get to know me even more, Briahna, is that I despise when people say things like Black folk are damaged, Black folk are broken, Black folk need to heal, Black folk need therapy. I mean, how would you feel if Tucker Carlson said all that? Because if you're saying it's true, you should have no problem with Tucker saying it, right? But this just demonstrates how even there are political traditions within the African-American political tradition that are really rooted in this kind of demobilization. And one of the things I noticed about Black nationalism when I read the origins is that the progenitors of Black nationalism weren't even slaves. They were free people of color. They were black men, most of them were men, in 1850, who created this philosophy in reaction to the Fugitive Slave Act because they realized that free people of color would be possibly threatened with coming back to the South. So as a result, the whole concept of back to Africa, we should leave, we need to circle the ranks. But it's an elite project because no one asks what the black folk who are in the plantations want to do with themselves, which is another problem with black nationalism. It's fundamentally an undemocratic politics of brokerage that always to the politics of containment, which is one of my major themes on this show too. That one of the reasons why black politics work is that it's a politics of containment in which the opinions of 42 million different people are foisted on a small elite class that usually work at the behest of the ruling class to their benefit. So one of the things we have on this show is that how these internal political traditions can become an obstacle to left politics that are rooted in actually changing the material lives of black people. And that's why when I talk about the black political traditions that I like, I talk about the Colored Farmers Alliance in the late 1800s. I talk about the black socialists. I talk about Hubert Harrison. I talk about Cyril Briggs. I talk about the black communists, because these are people who realized that they could get over the barrier of racism and create alliances with white people to challenge working class and poor white people, to challenge capitalism and change their lives. But the modern neoliberal Negro of today doesn't even want you to know about those politics. And the last thing they want is black people embracing them, because they know that will be the greatest threat to the ruling class that they've ever seen in this country.
Yeah, what's interesting is that it feels like the liberal chattering class, the Ta-Nehisi Coates of the world, the black gatekeepers who have so much power, have so much rhetorical power because of the way identity has been a replacement for substantive politics on the left for so long, to lead, it's like, I don't know how it was when you guys were in college or if you went to HBC or PWI, but when I was in college, whatever the black kids did was cool on the whole campus. Like the black kids set the social agenda for the campus. The biggest party of the year was the party thrown by the Black Men's Forum, and on down the line. And I feel like in the media, it's the same way. They put black people on a pedestal as a replacement for substantive politics, such that whatever Ta-Nehisi Coates says, it's not just him speaking for Black America. It's him basically giving white people direction more broadly about what they should believe in and what and who they should support. And so all of these people, through not necessarily a fault of their own, are in an enormous position of influence. The Van Newkirks of the world, the Jelani Cobbs of the world, the Astrid Hirdes, all of them. And so, what you end up getting is a kind of politics that resists any kind of substantive policy as a solution for the problems, not just on the right, but as on the left. So on the right, and you saw this with my recent discussion with Glenn Lowry, there is the personal responsibility conversation that is a justification or a proposed solution for racial disparities and inequity, is to say, well, Black people just need to get their house in order. Not policy, Black people need to get their house in order. And on the left, you have narratives about racism, often which are true. There's for sure racism. It's happening. But that becomes a replacement or a stand-in for actually pulling any kind of policy lever that could help to deal with the underlying effects of racism, the material effects of racism. And instead, they want you to engage in this project where they cure racism, which is a very valiant goal. I also hope we cure racism. I am open to and supportive of any plan anybody has to cure racism. But in the interim, I just would humbly suggest that you should make sure people have housing as a human right, healthcare as a human right, a living wage, and on down the line. But when you start having a more materialist analysis, which none of the Black chattering class do, whether or not because they are intentionally trying to be agents of neoliberalism or because they simply have drunk their own Kool-Aid and are part of this culture that truly doesn't have any confidence or awareness of the ability of policies to actually affect change, because we haven't had any substantive progressive policies in 80 years. You don't see it. And so you get two parties and two media narrative cycles that are both really aimed at deflecting from doing anything meaningful, substantive, and purposeful. And that's the place that we're in right now. And that's the kind of re-education that I think we need to do, not just in the context of a campaign cycle, but all the time. Because these people, they genuinely, sincerely believe at this point that there's no coalition that could ever be made with a white person, that poor white people are genuinely committed to racism more than their own uplift and will vote against any policy that has benefits for Black people. At the same time, they say that and they believe that to be true. And there is some empirical evidence for that, right? Like, it's not an accident that we get welfare queen narratives and all these kind of things to turn people off of these social programs. But if you believe that, at the same time, the same camp will say you have to frame every policy in explicitly racialized terms. So even universal policies, the narrative you have to pitch to get any kind of pickup in the media is Medicare for all is going to cut the maternal mortality rate gap, which it will, or student debt relief is going to cut the wealth gap, which it will. And all these things are true, but there is this interesting tension that emerges where the same group of people who resist the idea of any multiracial coalition because white people are turned off from policies framed in racial terms absolutely insist that every policy is framed in racial terms, or else it's somehow trying to betray Black people or sneak something past, or, you know, kind of betraying your values. And there's a real confusion about, you know, having a certain dexterity with messaging and actually running away from your core principles, which is what neoliberals, the Clintons principally ultimately did.
Part of the problem with this posturing is it fails to understand the reality of something we talked about on your show, and I've talked about several times about how Black politics actually works. This doesn't happen because Black people don't realize why Social Security works for them, why Medicare works for them, why the VA hospital works better for them than having no health care. This happens because Black politics, as we've talked about, is a politics of containment, where you have the Black political class using membership organizations, Black churches, HBCUs, civil rights organizations to curate the members of these organizations to infiltrate the social ideological superstructure of Black communities in exchange for patronage they get from corporate Democrats, which they give to these constituents in public good services to leverage their affiliation to basically push Black voters into the neoliberal faction of the Democratic Party.
I wanted to read something before we go. We're coming up on the end of the hour. This is from SNCC activist Phil Hutchings from, I believe, 1970. Phil Hutchings may have summed up the limitations of Black control best during his speech, or sorry, this is 1968, at the 1968 Newark Black Political Convention. Hutchings argued that Black municipal control would not deliver the kinds of fundamental changes radicals desired because of regional, demographic trends, and powerful political and economic interests. The movement of more affluent residents to suburbia and the advent of regional planning and metropolitan government schemes undermine the ethnic incorporation model implied in notions of indigenous control. When we say indigenous control, we mean Black people indigenous to their area. Hutchings concluded that Black control would not resolve racial inequalities. In an especially prophetic moment, he foretold the mid-70s shift towards left politics that would follow as the new Black political elite took shape. Quote, "It may be that Black people will have to have Blacks in power over them within the confines of this system before they can truly recognize the necessity to organize against capitalism as well as the racist aspects of America. Indeed, the pitfalls of nationalist consciousness became more apparent as Black indigenous control became a reality in many American cities. Following the election of Gibson," we're talking about the first Black mayor of Newark, New Jersey, "many activists complained of enduring problems of police brutality against Blacks. By the mid-70s, latent tensions between radical activists and the Gibson administration grew into open conflict over a CAP-sponsored urban development project." We can get into that in the bonus half if you guys want to talk.
Good book, man. If you haven't read it yet, Briahna, I suggest it greatly to check out Cedric Johnson's work. You got to have him on your show. That brother is
I would love to.
One of my favorite political scientists. Yes, there are other Black left political scientists besides Adolph Reed that people can talk to. Preston Smith is
an amazing encyclopedia. The latest Adam Curtis movie has this character named Michael X. It's a real person, and no one knew who the fuck he was. I was asking everybody. I'm asking Touré, you know everything. Who is this guy? I was like, I don't know. Adolf, I don't know the nigga. Pascal, never heard of the nigga. I texted Cedric at like 6 a.m. and he was like, "Oh yeah, Michael X." And he like rattled off his fucking bio in the text hella quick. Encyclopedic knowledge of this shit on a global scale. Love Cedric to death.
What's interesting though, in that quote that you just read from Cedric's book for that brother who's a member of SNCC, he specifically says how it will take black people being in control of black people for them to realize the limitations of this nationalist thinking and how basically it's basically bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean,
that to me is what you were facing the whole time you would be doing press. It was kind of this almost this resurgence of a early 70s, well, what you gonna do for us ass narrative. And
yeah, and the thing is, there's no the real trick here is that they're people say, what's the black agenda? And I'm like, also, yes, let's do a black agenda. What do you want? Write it and I'll print it up. Write it and I'll incorporate it into the campaign. You know, but the thing is, when people say that, the part that is missing from the conversation often is that they don't actually, outside of kind of like the black capitalism, give loans to minority business owners, don't have a particularized program in mind. There's reparations and there's
black capitalism.
Black capitalism. And that's not like, I don't mean that as a gotcha. Like, what is true is that overwhelmingly the issues that Black Americans rank as their political priorities and their policy priorities happen to be anti-poverty programs that are universal in nature.
Yeah.
Right? They're talking about that they have concerns about the affordability of education, the safety of their neighborhoods, you know, housing stability, healthcare. The rankings for Black people and the rankings for white people, when you're looking at the top 5, it's like the same 4 out of the top 5, and they might be in a slightly different order, but it's the same priorities. And they're the kind of issues that are going to be resolved by universal programs. They just are. And that doesn't mean there shouldn't be specific allotments and grants and reparations and ways to address the consequences of redlining and efforts to put more money into poor districts. But the problem is, when you live in a racial caste system, even if you choose to control for race instead of class, you're going to be doing largely substantively the same thing, except you're cutting out some affluent Black people like myself, focusing on the people who actually need it. And so, you know, what was so interesting in that dynamic is, well, tell me what you want. Tell me what some other candidate is doing that we're not doing, and we'll happily do it. Like, what is the thing you want? But it was never about that. It was never about a specific program. It was never about a specific policy. Now, was it still on the campaign to try to do a better job of like doing the same pantomime that some of these other campaigns were doing, and to do a better job of framing the substantive policies that, in my view, are what would enormously and most substantially benefit Black people, and explain how that works and why it would help to Black people? Yes, the onus is on the campaign to do that. And I don't think that we did that to the best of our ability. Yeah, if you have Pete Buttigieg's like plan to restore Black America or whatever it's called, which is like absolutely nothing, being heralded by the Root as him being better for Black folks, you know, than Bernie Sanders. That Jason Johnson had these Root rankings, and he put Pete Buttigieg near the top of the same week he like shouted at that woman, you know, saying like, I don't want your vote, because she was mad about, you know, she was upset over some criminal justice, issues, some police shooting, I believe, that had happened in South Bend.
You know, like, Johnson's not a fan of Jason Johnson.
This guy is a Black. Let me tell you why I don't like.
Hold on, before you finish, we're over an hour. Bree, will you be able to join us for the bonus half?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say that that's the kind of laundering that political class is doing. It's not just their silence on the issue of Bernie. It's manufacturing consent for a community that, you know, like everybody, only has a limited attention span, is only consuming so much media. And the existence of Black media can be particularly pernicious when it's Black and neoliberal media and people are taking it at face value.
Fired. Take that, Jason Johnson. So, if you are a patron, we'll see you in like 5 minutes. If not, become a patron. Patreon.com/Bitter Lake Presents. Easy as that. You can see part 2 of this conversation where Briahna is going to settle this debate for Pascal and I over who is the greatest light-skinned R&B singer. And what is Black Yacht Rock? It's a real thing. And Frankie Beverly is part of it. And also, why did Pascal lie and say that he watched Star Trek when his black ass doesn't watch sci-fi at all?
I watched Star Trek as a kid, man. I watched the original Star Trek. Don't even get there. Go
and
there.
Briahna and I will have a debate on why Star Wars is supremely better.
Oh, Lord. You know what? I actually don't know if I can join this after show.
There you go.
I just got a text and
Briahna, thank you very much for spending some time.
I will send you the link via email and Twitter.
Jesus, that's an off-air conversation. Thank you very much.
All right. See you in a bit.
And we are out.